So Thor, let's say you have a magic wand
Mm,
and you can wave it because you don't have problem with resources, you don't have problems with money. You
yes.
can build the best thing of the best thing. How would that thing look like if you had that magic wand right now?
The best thing of the best thing. It's a good point. I mean, I think one thing that jumps to mind immediately is sort of
I will set up. All right. So we are here at the heart of the developer relations in New York City, DevRelCon 2025. And man, I have the privilege for being sitting here with somebody who traveled all the way from Singapore, right?
yes.
And you work from Singapore.
Correct. Yeah, I've been there for 6 years now. Originally moved there with Stripe.
Yeah.
And then was building kind of Superbase for the last 4 years, and now joined ElevenLabs kind of 6 months ago.
Amazing. So the way I like to get this conversation started is, let's say I'm an outsider. I do not know anything about tech at all.
Okay.
I'm not in tech. I'm just a lawyer, let's say. How do you describe to me what do you actually do? What's your job and what's the company you're representing here actually do?
I think, yeah, at the core, the job really is kind of teaching. So we're really, well, it's both learning and teaching, I think, which is the amazing part of the job, because you get to learn a lot of new technologies all the time. And then you have kind of the privilege to basically deepen your understanding by turning that into content to teach others how to build things, how to achieve things. And I think, yeah, it's a really great profession for people that are just kind of naturally curious.
Right.
Well, which generally is important if you're a software engineer, because you're just learning constantly. There's always new concepts, new technologies you need to get up to speed with. But then I think with DevRel specifically, you kind of want that where it's like you have that aha moment,
Right.
and you're like, you want to share that with people. And so you want to help others to have that same aha moment. And I think that is really kind of what rewards us in DevRel, is like when we see others like have that aha moment and they're like, whoa, I can like build this and I can put this on like a Raspberry Pi, and then my grandparents can like use it to like talk to me. So I think that is really kind of why we do this. And now for me specifically with ElevenLabs. So ElevenLabs, we're both kind of a research as well as a deployment company for AI audio. So we specialize on anything audio. So a big part of that is voices and speech generation. But we also do sound effects. We do automatic speech recognition, so the kind of speech to text side of things. We're working on music models as well. So anything that's kind of audio, that's what we specialize on. And so we're a research company because we build and train our own models. But then also we're a deployment company. We put those models in production and give kind of everyone the tools. So both developers as well as, kind of the media and entertainment industry sort of tools and apps to kind of utilize this technology. So that's sort of where ElevenLabs comes from. And for me personally, this is really exciting because so I live in Singapore. Singapore has a lot of different languages. I'm kind of learning Mandarin as well. Then I'm German originally. So, my side of the family mostly speaks German. And so the ElevenLabs mission is kind of to make all the content available in any voice and any language. And so basically this combination of language, audio, APIs, and AI kind of together, that's sort of all the things that I'm like super curious about.
Yeah.
And then I can apply this to, so lately I've been tinkering with kind of hardware projects. So like Raspberry Pi, ESP32 microcontrollers and kind of things like that. And so I think that is really the amazing thing, that like you get to teach people, but also you get to do a lot of learning. You get to learn new technologies, kind of learn how you can apply it to other things. And so I think it's a really, really, yeah, privileged position to be in, to kind of do this learning and teaching as part of your job. So yeah, I can only recommend for more people to get into this profession.
It's beautiful. That I totally agree with that. So you mentioned you were at Superbase previously, and now you are with ElevenLabs. How has changed? Talking about the approach to developer experience, coming from a product focused mostly on backend systems and databases, compared now to ElevenLabs, which, like you said, is everything. It's deployment, it's models, it's voice, which is a completely complex world for developers. So how that changed for you when it comes to approaching developer experience?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. So I think yeah, the interesting thing with Superbase is that it's fully open source. It really can be applied to kind of any project. It's based on Postgres, so probably for 99, well, maybe say 95% of projects that you're building, it'll be a good choice of kind of back end stack for your data, for your authentication, file storage. Now with the ElevenLabs, obviously it's a bit more niche in that sense that, not necessarily every application, needs a voice. Although I actually now tend to disagree, because I think in the future we'll actually treat voice almost like now, we kind of do responsive design, because like you need your app, you need your website to work on a mobile phone. I'd argue that not in the not too distant future, every app is going to have a voice and is going to have that mobility of the voice
Sure.
as kind of a central part to it. And actually, I think like what I love to see is sort of people to actually design voices for their applications, almost like a personality, where the brand design is super important for your app, for your websites. People are like going to like Airbnb and do like case studies of like, oh, this is like an amazing experience, what have you. And I think in the future people will like design a voice as part of their brand identity, and like to the extent where you want to kind of get to the point where it's like, oh, I love talking to Appsmith. They have like a really cool voice. Like for example, your voice or something like that.
Exactly.
And so I think voice is going to be very, very central to kind of applications in the future, a central part of the user interface. And so I think that becomes very interesting, where yes, it is quite different in the sense that working with audio is pretty complex. There's like, different audio codecs and things like that. And so from a developer experience point of view, generally what we try to do is abstract a lot of that away to make it as easy as possible. So we work on the client libraries for, JavaScript, for Python, for kind of the mobile SDK. So mobile is a big focus for us now, kind of Swift and Kotlin. And really basically encode kind of that knowledge around audio codecs, around streaming, really build that in there, that for you as kind of the broader developer audience, you don't have to know kind of all the specifics. Obviously, if you want to know, that's great. We're also looking to create more content to sort of help people understand, okay, what makes a voice a voice? So how does audio actually work? Like digital audio is super interesting, but also super complex. And so I think, yeah, ideally, and I think this goes down for like anyone working on developer experience, the main goal is, no matter sort of if it's a web developer, if it's a mobile developer, if they are working, in Flutter, if they are working in React Native, you want them, you want to meet them wherever they are.
Exactly.
So if they are working in Swift, you want to make sure that for them, that is the best experience that they can have when they're building kind of Swift apps, when they're building React Native apps. And so really our job sort of in the developer experience side of DevRel is to make sure that that sort of experience from like, I've never touched this product before, to like, I have a conversational agent that like I can talk to and that has knowledge about my product and that can, call tools and
Yeah.
just make that sort of the easiest way basically to get them to that aha moment.
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly rewarding because when you nail that experience and you get people to that aha moment, they will talk about it. And I think that's kind of the big part of like, product-led growth or developer experience-led growth, community-led growth, where you want to get to that point where people will talk about your developer experience, about your documentation experience, where they like tell their friend like, oh, dude, like last weekend I was at this hackathon and like I needed like a voice for my, like app, which doesn't have a user interface because, it's just running on like a device and it's for the elderly or what have you. And like it literally took me, like 20 minutes to like design a voice with ElevenLabs and like make it conversational, and they will tell all their friends, and like, their friend might be, a solo entrepreneur who will go on to YC the next, month. And like,
Yeah.
so everything is connected somehow. And so I think if you can boil it down to get developers to that aha moment, no matter if they are, web developer, iOS developer, Android developer, hardware component developer, all of these are very different worlds, very different communities, but just try to understand them, try to get them to that aha moment as quickly as you can,
Yeah.
and they will shout about you like from the rooftops. And I think that is incredibly rewarding.
That's great. Yeah, completely. Remove the friction, which is leads me to the next question, which is, where do you see the most friction point when it comes to adoption of any AI tool? In this case, ElevenLabs being a voice generation tool. Where do you see that gap or that friction from converting awareness, where I'm totally interested about there, versus actual conversion? Where is that tipping point?
Yeah. I think a big challenge is sort of, and I'm trying to sort of figure out how to do that well. Is sort of, yeah, it's easy to get them started, to get them like do an example project, get them talking. But actually to the extent, because, right now, like generating speech at scale, it is expensive, right? And so we need to figure out that balance of like, okay, how can we get them sort of to the point where they are actually like, they have an application that, they can also like pay us money. Because like in the end, eventually you want them to be successful, so that, ideally you can be successful as well. So I think that is probably the biggest friction in terms of like, okay, how can we get sort of the entire developer sort of community to try this out and like build things that they will be successful with and like make money with in the future, so that we can also make money ourselves.
So is the biggest friction growth then? Like from trying the product and see something interesting versus actually seeing value in a bigger implementation where they can have growth, and obviously you will grow as well.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of figuring out the pricing, whereas like, obviously you want everyone to like get up and running as quickly as possible. But then I think right now it's just kind of a steep sort of curve from like, okay, you have the free tier, but like if you're building, like a conversational thing and you want to test that, it's actually quite expensive to run that testing. And like eventually on the free tier, you run out of credits fairly quickly if you're doing kind of a conversational thing. But that's also because, it is very compute intensive for us to run it. So it's, I think I'm trying to figure out sort of like, how can we get developers onboarded and like testing and like building without them running into like the friction of like running out of credits like incredibly quickly. And so I think it's just kind of that challenge where like, yeah, how do we do that?
So maybe getting them into a better use case up front without them to try out very quickly running out of credits. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because like, ElevenLabs sort of comes was very successful very quickly with kind of the media and entertainment industry. And so I think like a lot of the pricing kind of reflects that and it's kind of targeted at that. And I think it's not the ideal pricing for developers. So that is kind of something I'm trying to figure out. What's the right point there? Obviously, as developers, we want everything to be free all the time, always, forever. Um, so obviously there's kind of a discrepancy there, but I think we can find kind of yeah, a balance where like developers will have a great time. So we do have this like startup grants program, and we work with a lot of the Y Combinators, the Antlers, the F.Incs, to help people really like get up and running with a product and like validate it, and like also for them to be able to give away their product for free, maybe for a while, for to like have that ability to convince people of their product. And there's some incredible builders out there building some really really awesome interfaces. Like F.Inc has some really cool hardware projects that are using voice, and yeah, it's super exciting to see what they're doing. And we're trying to build these programs like the Startup Grants program, where we can get them kind of the runway they need to sort of validate their product and then get successful, and then we can grow together.
Great. So when it comes to the audience you're trying to target, are you mostly focused or trying to focus on vibe coders or people getting into AI, or are you also targeting like more experienced senior developers that understand like codecs and how to transmit audio, which are technically complex? Or how do you bridge that gap between people who are just using it? I've seen ElevenLabs being used by people just doing videos for YouTube, trying to monetize AI content,
Yeah.
which are non-technical, versus very high complex, audio transmission and audio concepts for synthesizers, for example.
Yeah.
So it's a large umbrella. Like how do you manage that?
Yes, it is an incredibly big audience. That is very true. Yeah. So for my team specifically, kind of the developers team, we call ourselves, and we have kind of different specializations within that. We really focus on kind of the individual developer. So a lot of that is sort of the self-serve developer. So a lot of what we track is kind of the developers signing up on the platform, and kind of new developers signing up on the platform. So that's kind of a big North Star metric that we track, as well as sort of active developers. So from these signups, how many of them actually go into production and become kind of active developers. But the focus very specifically is on kind of the self-serve individual developer audience, rather than kind of the enterprise, or so we do have like forward deployed engineers as well. We have solutions engineers. So we have kind of various different flavors of kind of customer facing engineers in the company.
Okay.
But for us specifically, we're focused on kind of the individual developer, self-serving the product, signing up. The great thing with that is if you can delight kind of the individual developer, you basically, like in the end, enterprise companies are made up of individual developers, right?
Sure.
And so if you can delight them, maybe with like their sort of hobby project on the side, they try it out and they're like, whoa, this is amazing. They will become kind of internal salespeople for you within sort of the larger enterprise organization. Really, a lot of this comes sort of from my time at Stripe, at Superbase. It was very much the same playbook, where it's like, if we nail the developer experience for the individual like developer,
Yeah.
in the end, the individual developer works in the enterprise, works in the government, what have you, and they will be delighted. They will be talking about you, and they will be sort of selling from the bottom up in their company. Maybe not like initially kind of a huge project, but like they will introduce you in like a new innovation project kind of within the enterprise, and slowly you will sort of grow your kind of adoption within there.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of how we see this within sort of the developers team at ElevenLabs. Really focus on delighting the individual developer, no matter, web, mobile, hardware, what have you. And if they have a great experience, ultimately we win kind of within the enterprise world as well.
That's true. Yeah. Getting them to be advocates of your product internally within the product. That's true. What's the coolest project or the coolest implementations you have seen of ElevenLabs so far?
There is so many. So one actually that I recently came across, and I'm chatting with them on Monday. They're called Hey Ado. So Hey ATO. It's actually a group of developers from Argentina who are now in San Francisco working with F.Inc.
Okay.
on a voice assistant specifically for the elderly.
Nice.
So, if you're thinking like we're in an incredibly globalized world, right? Like people are moving to San Francisco from Argentina to like build their projects, right? And so oftentimes the amount of time that we can spend with our grandparents is limited as they age. And so they are specifically focusing on building a voice assistant that they can use to actually interact with their kind of grandparents, in the sense that they actually have an app as well where they can kind of see, like put in a reminder where it's like, oh, remind my granddad to like take his medication at 7 p.m. And then the voice assistant will like remind the grandparent, in like the physical space at home, and like talk to them. Also, I mean,
And
like
and they could train it with that person's voice. So it will be like their own kid talking to their parents.
yeah, I think that might be a bit freaky. I'm not sure if they are doing that yet, but no, I think it's just really around like the, also kind of the language capabilities.
Sure.
So for ElevenLabs, we're really focused on, enabling a lot of different languages. So now our most recent model, 11v3, does 70 plus languages, so 70, which sounds like a lot, but it's crazy, because if you look at India itself has, I think, more than 50 different languages, which is wild. I think so now we support like 13 of the Indian languages. India is a big market as well. There's, a lot of like a lot of the kind of support applications, a lot of the e-commerce,
Yeah.
digital like Soho, FreshBooks, like a lot of the large kind of enterprise companies are based there. And like some of them, I think we did a case study recently with one of them who are doing like 60,000 calls per day. And so like the scale there is just incredibly huge. And, obviously there's tons of different languages, English, Hindi, sort of some of the main languages. But yeah, so I think kind of the basically connecting sort of everyone together through, speaking their language is
Right.
kind of a big mission of ours. And so, yeah, Hey Ado is a cool one that I think is really kind of employing that to sort of, bridge some of the connection, gaps that we might now have with, being kind of living away from sort of our families. And
What one of the demos that you showed in the 11 Labs event a couple weeks ago in the office that I really enjoyed is that you mentioned about the fact that yeah, some countries might speak Spanish. For example, like I'm from Costa Rica, and I can say that none of the Latin America countries speak the same Spanish.
yeah.
So one of the things that I found really cool about 11 Labs is that it's capable of understanding like, yeah, English anyone can understand, but complexity, like you mentioned in Singapore, there might be like dialects or things that
Yes.
are very specific to that particular, let's say, flavor of the language. Like for example, in Spanish, like understanding a person from Chile, it's quite complex. So can you speak a little bit about that, like the complexities around language?
Yeah. Yeah, language, and then also accents is a big one, right? As well as like Spanglish, Singlish, kind of all these mixing of languages.
Yes.
And so in the end, it actually comes down a lot to kind of the quality of the training data. And so that's also why, we're kind of, our research team is really focused on like, okay, acquiring that quality training data and then training the models across all these different languages. So I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget, when they see kind of a new voice model sort of come out and they're like, whoa, this is amazing, the expressiveness and kind of all that. It's easy enough to do for, English kind of nowadays, like,
Yeah.
but that's just one language, right? And yes, a lot of people speak English, but a lot of people also speak a lot of different languages. And so doing this kind of at scale across so many different languages, I think that is sort of really where our research team shines. And like, I personally, can't speak to like, what the training data is. So like, it's a combination of like data that we've acquired, through partners, as well as like some public data and kind of things. But yeah, in the end, it boils down to the quality of your training data to then kind of run that at scale across, like 99 different languages. And so, yeah, I think that's where ElevenLabs really shines. And that's, I think, where sort of us being both a research company as well as the deployment company
Right.
really kind of has that effect where you just kind of get the best quality of voices across so many different languages. And that's our mission, yeah.
So Thor, let's say you have a magic wand and you can wave it because you don't have problem with resources. You don't have problems with money.
Yes.
You can build the best thing of the best thing. How would that thing look like if you had that magic wand right now?
The best thing of the best thing. It's a good point. I mean, I think one thing that jumps to mind immediately is sort of hiring, right? Like, I'm trying to build the team, and I mean, a big challenge is so in DevRel teams, what you want to have is a huge diversity of talents, and I think the biggest challenge with that as well is like when it comes down to hiring. Like if you just run everyone through like the same coding interview,
Right.
you won't get kind of the diversity of the team that you're sort of looking for. And I think that is sort of a big challenge in terms of like just having sort of the time to find the right people of like diversity, because really what we want to do is we want to create a lot of content, also in kind of a lot of different developer communities. We want to create content for iOS, for Kotlin, for React Native, for Flutter, for .NET, right? For ESP IDF, for Arduino, for like Raspberry Pi. So there's like such an incredible breadth of communities out there, and so I think if I had a magic wand, I would wave it to basically get me a list of like who are like the DevRel people and developer influencers in like all these different communities that create like all this content that we can work with. So, hiring is one thing, but then also we want to find kind of who are sort of the folks creating content kind of in these different communities. And, maybe we can, hiring is an incredibly lengthy process, but maybe we can like contract them to like create content with us. And so really sort of reaching out into all these different communities, I think that'd be like my one magic wand that I would want. And then the other one, which maybe is a little bit more personal, but in terms of like, I've been tinkering with like the hardware stuff.
Yeah.
And if we look at the developer experience of like the ESP32 microcontrollers,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like if you're working in like React now and like you have your cursor and you're doing tap, 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 and like you're asking your agent to write your code, holy, like for ESP32 microcontrollers, the LLMs don't have a clue because it's such a closed ecosystem. There's actually not that much information that the LLMs are trained on yet. So I think my other next magic wand would be someone to actually build a great developer experience for hardware so that I can like actually build some cool stuff. And like you should check out my Twitter at Thor WebDev. I've been tinkering with like some like tiny microcontrollers and trying to get like voice agents on that. And it's super rewarding when you get it working, but it is incredibly soul crushing while it doesn't work. So
Exactly.
but that is the life of developer relations. You just stick with it, you figure it out, you find the people in the community that can help you, and I think that's why I love open source so much, because there is so many incredible people that like are willing to share their knowledge and like contribute, and it's a great community. And that probably would be my third magic wand, is to be able to do more open source at ElevenLabs as well. And it just comes down to, I think, the resourcing. Like we've been growing incredibly quickly. I think we've more than doubled the team in like the last 5 months, which is just wild and is a challenge in its own. But yeah. So yeah, I need a couple of wands, please.
No, yeah, I just had one. You already requested three. That's interesting. But what I love the most is that most of the people said when I asked that question,
Yeah.
I will love the product to be X, Y, and Z, or computing to be less expensive. But you focus on the people, and that really impacted, because if you get the best team around your product, you'll probably build the best product.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking about the best product to be the outcome, you're thinking about the best people who will be building the best product and the best community around it. So I think that's very powerful. So for the last topic to close up this amazing conversation is we got on the table our branded spicy sauce. It's our own Appsmith spicy sauce. I'm not gonna get you to try it out,
Okay.
but you can take one home
Thank you.
by answering the question. Just give me your spicy take. What's your spicy take on the current world, like on AI or whatever something you will say is controversial for you? This is my hot take. This is what I personally think.
Controversial hot take. That's a good question. I think my first controversial hot take is just personally, I don't do well with spice, which is unfortunate because I live in Asia, where there's a lot of incredible spicy food. But for our industry right now, I think it's the toughest thing. I think right now is just juggling all this hype, and there's so much hype. It's crazy. Like in my talk, I was kind of looking at, like the last quarter, the last 4 months. Is it 3 months a quarter? Well,
Let's remote.
anything. But like it feels like the last 4 months, what happened in the last 4 months is like now, what happened like the last 4 years before. It feels like so fast.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing that is just really challenging is sort of like, everyone wants to like keep up with all the hype, and like there's like every other day there's a new hype train you need to jump on.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where like sometimes disagree with like some other people in the company in terms of like which are sort of the hype trains, because ideally we want to jump on every hype train, right?
So
But the problem is if you do that, you kind of end up not having time to build a lot of the foundational work, a lot of the like a lot of the work in the background, like a lot of the tutorials, the documentation, kind of this foundational stuff. Yes, it doesn't get you like a million views kind of like within like a week or what have you. But I think it's really important to have kind of these foundations as well, because it is all this content, even though maybe it doesn't get a million views kind of, within a couple of days, over time, you have kind of these compounding effects, sort of all this content that you create, kind of the baseline, sort of the groundwork that maybe isn't as glamorous, is incredibly important as well. And so I think my hot take is like, we need to find the balance of like hype train versus sort of groundwork,
yeah.
that kind of, compounds over time. And also maybe just like being able to take the time, even though everything moves so quickly, to be able to take the time to focus on like the quality of the groundwork and having the foundations in place that over time you can win and you can see things compound. Because yes, a lot of the hype stuff is very shiny,
Yeah.
and you get like incredible numbers, but I think like over time to see like how much of that hype actually translates into usage versus like the compounding sort of groundwork converts into usage long term. And the problem is you don't know. It takes time to like understand how that shapes out. But so I think my hot take is find the balance of like the hype and the groundwork, and sort of, ideally kind of find the balance and work on both of it.
That's a great hot take, because it happened to us like at some point where we were getting all of these models launching every week. So we did a video integration with Appsmith with DeepSeek, Appsmith with GPT
Yeah.
4.0, Appsmith with Cloud Code. And yeah, we got 15,000, 20,000 views. None of them converted. Versus like a very specific focus on, I don't know, Appsmith UI packages, which is something the community was asking. Low views, huge growth and impact.
Yeah.
So you have to understand what success looks like from an enterprise for the internal focus, rather than just getting a bunch of numbers that marketing will be happy about, but does it translate into conversion?
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I think ultimately you need a bit of both. But yeah, like finding the balance, and I think that is kind of inherently our challenge in DevRel now, as like everything is like moving so quickly, finding that balance of like some hype, some groundwork, and ideally that over time compounding to success.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Thor. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely
It's
learned a lot.
amazing that you brought all the gear, and I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for your time. And thank you, everyone who watched this episode. Make sure to watch the resources we're going to put in to sign up for 11 Labs and try it out and get to know Thor. He's amazing. Connect with him and all the social media links that we're putting in the description. And we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.